From Marriage to Murder, the Kirsty Wilkinson Tragedy. The Dreams of a Young Girl. Kirsty Wilkinson was born on June 19, 1984, in Century, England, a quaint town known for its tight-knit community and scenic landscapes. She grew up in a small but loving household with her parents, David and Catherine Wilkinson, and her two older sisters, Sonia and Haley. The Wilkinson family shared a close bond, with Catherine nurturing a particularly warm relationship with Kirsty, the youngest and most vibrant of the three daughters. From an early age, Kirsty's radiant personality and infectious energy made her a standout presence in any setting. She was the type of child who lit up every room she entered, her bright smile and boundless curiosity earning her the affection of friends and neighbors alike. But beyond her cheerful demeanor lay a determined spirit and a mind filled with big dreams. Kirsty wanted to be a model. Inspired by glossy magazine spreads and television fashion shows, she envisioned herself gracing runways and photo shoots, dressed in the latest haute couture. Life, however, rarely unfolds as we imagine. At the age of 14, Kirsty's life took a dramatic turn when her family relocated to Bridgend, South Wales. The transition brought not just a change of scenery, but also new challenges that tested her resilience. For Kirsty, it meant starting over a new town, a new school, and the challenge of making new friends. While her striking appearance and confidence initially drew attention, she quickly realized that breaking into the modeling industry was far more challenging than she had anticipated. Undeterred, Kirsty refused to give up. She pursued opportunities wherever she could find them, participating in local talent searches and amateur photo shoots. These small victories brought her closer to her dream, but they were not enough to provide financial stability. Kirsty understood early on that she could not rely solely on her aspirations. To support herself and contribute to her family's finances, she took on a variety of part-time jobs. From waitressing at busy diners to working as a cashier and even cleaning houses, Kirsty's work ethic became one of her defining traits. Despite her relentless determination, the harsh realities of financial strain began to weigh on Kirsty, forcing her to make increasingly difficult choices. At 17, Kirsty made a decision that would change the trajectory of her life. Pressured by mounting expenses and limited options, she began working at a nightlife establishment in Bridgend, an environment known for its adult entertainment. To protect her identity and shield her family from the truth, she adopted the pseudonym Megan. Though this job offered Kirsty a newfound financial independence, enabling her to afford her own apartment and set aside savings, it came at a heavy emotional cost. Yet, it also brought immense emotional burden. She lived in constant fear of her secret being exposed, creating a barrier between herself and those she loved most. For her family, Kirsty painted a picture of stability and normalcy, claiming she worked as an administrator for a local business. Her double life, while financially rewarding, became a source of inner conflict. She longed to escape it and start over with a clean slate, but the means to do so seemed perpetually out of reach. Through it all, Kirsty maintained her close ties with her family, particularly her mother, Catherine. To them, she appeared responsible, driven, and goal-oriented. They had no idea of the weight she carried or the sacrifices she made to maintain the illusion of a stable, ordinary life. Kirsty clung to the hope that one day she could leave her secret world behind and finally realize the dreams she had held on to since she was a little girl. But life had other plans for Kirsty Wilkinson, plans that would lead her down a path of unimaginable heartbreak and tragedy. A fateful meeting. In the autumn of 2004, Kirsty Wilkinson's life took another unexpected turn when she met Paul Grabham. The encounter happened at a lively party in one of Bridgend's bustling nightclubs. Kirsty, then 20 years old, had attended with friends, hoping to unwind from the pressures of her dual life. Paul, just a year older, immediately noticed her. His confidence and assertive nature drew Kirsty's attention, while her radiant beauty and engaging smile captivated him. Paul Grabham had a complicated past. Born in 1983 in South Wales, he grew up in a home marked by instability, where shouting matches between his parents were a nightly occurrence. The constant tension left Paul feeling neglected and deeply insecure. His parents' frequent arguments created a chaotic home environment, leaving Paul feeling neglected and unwanted. By his teenage years, he began skipping school, clashing with teachers, and experimenting with substances. This destructive pattern escalated, leading him to drop out of school at 18. Searching for financial independence, Paul turned to escort work, offering his services to both men and women. While this provided him with income, it also exposed him to violence and humiliation, further fueling his anger and isolation. Despite their vastly different lives, Kirsty and Paul found themselves inexplicably drawn to each other. Kirsty saw in Paul someone who seemed to offer understanding, while Paul was captivated by her warmth and optimism, qualities he had rarely experienced. Their initial interaction was brief, filled with light conversation and flirtatious smiles. Paul presented himself as charming and self-assured, hiding the darker aspects of his life. To Kirsty, who had grown weary of the judgment she often faced, Paul seemed refreshingly non-judgmental. For Paul, Kirsty represented something he had never truly known: warmth and hope. Their connection, however, did not immediately blossom. After that night, they kept in sporadic contact but didn't pursue a serious relationship. For Kirsty, the encounter was just a fleeting moment in her complex life, while Paul's struggles with addiction and erratic behavior continued to dominate his world. 3 years later, in late 2007, their paths crossed again, this time under far more complicated circumstances. Paul, now deeply entrenched in substance dependency and living a chaotic life, visited the nightlife establishment where Kirsty worked. Recognizing her despite her pseudonym Megan, Paul struck up a conversation. Initially awkward, the exchange soon turned friendly, and the two reminisced about their first meeting years earlier. Paul expressed how often he had thought about her since their first meeting, sharing vivid memories of that night. His sincerity, or what seemed like sincerity, struck a chord with Kirsty and softened her initial hesitation. Kirsty hesitated. She was acutely aware of the stark contrasts between their lives, but something about Paul's persistence intrigued her. Against her better judgment, she agreed to meet him again. What began as casual outings soon evolved into a deeper connection. Paul shared stories of his alleged successes, painting a picture of a man ready to turn his life around. Kirsty, yearning for someone who understood her struggles without judgment, began to trust him. By December 2007, their relationship had intensified. Paul's attentiveness manifested in grand gestures like surprise visits and heartfelt notes, which seemed to fill the emotional void Kirsty had carried for so long. He spoke of settling down, starting fresh, and building a family. For Kirsty, these promises reignited her hope of leaving her secret life behind. Yet, Paul's charm masked a manipulative and self-serving agenda. While he appeared devoted, he saw Kirsty not just as a partner but as a financial safety net. Despite her family's growing concerns, Kirsty believed she had found someone who truly accepted her. She began to confide in Paul more than she had in anyone else, sharing her dreams and fears. Paul, in turn, encouraged her belief that their future together would be bright, even as his own dark habits persisted in the shadows. As the months went by, their relationship became increasingly serious. Kirsty, blinded by the promise of love and stability, failed to notice the cracks forming beneath the surface. What began as a fairy tale of hope and renewal would soon unravel into a nightmare path strewn with manipulation, betrayal, and heartbreak, the full extent of which no one could have predicted. A whirlwind romance. By early 2008, Kirsty Wilkinson and Paul Grabham's relationship had evolved into a full-blown romance. For Kirsty, it felt like a long-awaited escape from the struggles and secrecy of her double life. Paul's promises of love and stability filled her with hope. He spoke vividly of their future, describing lazy Sunday mornings in a cozy home, shared dreams of starting a family, and the kind of stability Kirsty had longed for. He spoke passionately about their future: a cozy home, a stable life, and the possibility of a family. To Kirsty, it was a dream she had held on to since childhood, finally within reach. Paul's charm and confidence, however, were deceptive. Beneath his affectionate exterior lay a man burdened by unresolved anger, addiction, and manipulative tendencies. While he presented himself as a reformed individual, ready to turn his life around, his actions often betrayed his words. The couple's whirlwind romance culminated in Paul proposing to Kirsty just weeks after they rekindled their connection. He painted a picture of devotion, convincing her that they were meant to be together. Kirsty, longing for love and acceptance, eagerly accepted his proposal. It was a decision that shocked her family, who had barely heard of Paul, let alone met him. Kirsty's mother, Catherine, was immediately skeptical. She noticed how Paul avoided specifics about his past and seemed overly eager to rush into marriage, raising questions she couldn't shake. She had always been protective of her youngest daughter and couldn't ignore the red flags. Paul's vague stories about his past and his rush to marry Kirsty left her uneasy. Kirsty's sisters, Sonia and Haley, shared their mother's concerns, noting Paul's evasiveness and lack of transparency. Despite their reservations, Kirsty remained steadfast. She believed that Paul was her chance at a fresh start, someone who saw her for who she truly was and accepted her without judgment. Her family's attempts to delay the wedding only strengthened her resolve. Kirsty assured them that Paul's past was behind him and that together they could build a better future. In February 2008, just weeks after their engagement, Kirsty and Paul were married in a modest ceremony. Her family attended reluctantly, their smiles masking unease. For Kirsty, it was the happiest day of her life, the culmination of a long-held dream for love and a fresh start. She beamed with joy, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. For her family, however, it marked the start of growing fears about what lay ahead. The honeymoon phase was fleeting. Soon after the wedding, Paul began to reveal the darker sides of his personality. His initial displays of affection, thoughtful notes, and surprise gestures soon gave way to subtle moments of irritation, followed by overt control. He moved into Kirsty's apartment and took charge of their finances, claiming it was necessary for their future stability. Kirsty, still caught up in the romance of their union, didn't object, but the control extended beyond finances. Paul started monitoring Kirsty's movements, questioning her about her day and discouraging her from maintaining close relationships with friends and family. He rationalized his behavior as concern for her well-being, but Kirsty began to feel the walls closing in around her. Despite the growing tension, Kirsty clung to the belief that Paul's initial promises were sincere. She convinced herself that his outbursts were temporary and that their love could overcome the challenges. She continued to work tirelessly, hoping to build the stable life Paul had promised. Yet, the cracks in their relationship were becoming harder to ignore. Paul's temper flared more frequently, and his demands grew increasingly unreasonable. Kirsty's once vibrant spirit began to dim under the weight of his control. By mid-2008, it was clear that the fairytale Kirsty had envisioned was unraveling. Paul's manipulative behavior and erratic moods were taking a toll on her emotionally and physically. But even as she began to recognize the toxic nature of their relationship, Kirsty held on to hope that the man she had fallen in love with was still there, buried beneath the anger and control. What Kirsty didn't realize was that Paul's promises of a better future had never been genuine. His motives were rooted in his own self-interest, and his darker tendencies would soon lead their relationship down a path of devastation. The shattering illusion. By late 2008, the cracks in Kirsty and Paul's marriage had widened into deep fissures. The idyllic life Paul had promised began to feel like a distant dream. His once charming demeanor had all but disappeared, replaced by unpredictable mood swings and an iron grip of control. Kirsty's optimism was fading, but she clung to the hope that things could still improve. Paul's control over Kirsty had grown suffocating. He monitored her phone calls, timed her outings, and demanded detailed explanations for every decision she made, leaving her with little room for autonomy. He demanded access to her bank account, scrutinized her spending, and questioned every aspect of her day. When Kirsty tried to maintain her independence or push back, Paul's temper would flare. The arguments, once confined to sharp words, began to escalate into physical confrontations. Kirsty was trapped in a cycle of abuse manipulation, followed by moments of apology and promises to change. Each promise, however, proved hollow. To the outside world, Kirsty maintained the facade of a happy life. She continued to work tirelessly to support both herself and Paul, who had made little effort to contribute financially. Her friends noticed her growing isolation and frequent exhaustion, but were often met with Kirsty's reassurances that everything was fine. Behind closed doors, however, her reality was starkly different. Paul's behavior became increasingly erratic. On one occasion, during an argument over finances, he destroyed Kirsty's phone, accusing her of hiding things from him. Another time, he forced her to cancel plans with friends, claiming they were a bad influence on her. These incidents chipped away at Kirsty's confidence, leaving her feeling increasingly isolated and powerless. One of the most chilling aspects of Paul's control was his ability to manipulate Kirsty into believing she was the problem. During arguments, he would claim she was too demanding or ungrateful, often reducing her to tears and making her question her own worth. He would twist arguments to make her feel guilty, claiming that her efforts weren't enough or that she was ungrateful for his love. These emotional tactics left Kirsty questioning her own judgment, deepening her dependence on Paul despite the harm he caused. By early 2009, Kirsty's spirit had all but dimmed. Her once bright personality had been dulled by months of emotional and physical abuse. Even so, she tried to hold on to the belief that she could fix their marriage. She began keeping a journal, pouring her fears and frustrations onto its pages. In one entry, she wrote, "I don't know who I am anymore. I want to believe in us, but I feel like I'm losing myself." Her family, particularly her mother Catherine, grew increasingly concerned. On one visit, Catherine noticed Kirsty's subdued demeanor and faint bruises on her wrist. When questioned, Kirsty quickly deflected, blaming work stress. Catherine tried to reach out, urging Kirsty to visit more often and confide in her. Kirsty, fearing Paul's wrath, often avoided these conversations or downplayed her struggles. Catherine's maternal instincts, however, told her that something was deeply wrong. The breaking point came in March 2009. After a heated argument at a nightclub, Paul left Kirsty stranded, storming off and returning home alone. Witnesses recalled seeing Kirsty looking visibly distressed but trying to maintain composure. Later that night, she called a taxi to take her home. It would be the last time anyone outside of Paul saw her alive. The days following Kirsty's disappearance were filled with conflicting accounts and growing suspicion. Paul claimed she had left on her own, taking some belongings and cash. However, her family immediately doubted his story. Kirsty had left behind her bank cards, her phone was unreachable, and she had made no contact with anyone. Catherine reported her missing, prompting an official investigation. When police began to question Paul, his behavior raised red flags. He was evasive, offering inconsistent details about the night Kirsty vanished. Investigators noticed suspicious changes in their apartment, fresh paint on the ceiling that barely concealed faint blood splatters and the conspicuous absence of a rug, which neighbors confirmed had been removed the day after Kirsty vanished. These discrepancies, coupled with witness testimonies and Kirsty's sudden silence, led authorities to suspect foul play. By early April 2009, the investigation took a tragic turn. A truck driver stopping along the side of the M4 highway discovered a suitcase partially hidden in the grass. Inside was Kirsty's lifeless body. Forensic analysis revealed signs of blunt force trauma and strangulation. The dream Kirsty had once clung to was now a nightmare fully realized. Paul was arrested shortly after Kirsty's body was discovered. His facade of innocence quickly crumbled under the weight of mounting evidence. The fresh paint on the ceiling was found to cover blood splatters, and traces of her blood were discovered in their apartment. CCTV footage placed Paul near the location where Kirsty's body was dumped, and further investigation revealed that he had used her bank card after her death. The story that had begun with promises of love and a bright future had spiraled into a tale of manipulation, violence, and betrayal, culminating in an unimaginable tragedy. Kirsty's life had been cut short by the very person she had believed would save her. For her family, the loss was devastating, a stark reminder of how manipulation and control can escalate into the ultimate betrayal. The trial and aftermath. The trial of Paul Grabham began in early 2010, unfolding as a chilling courtroom drama that captivated the public. The prosecution meticulously laid out the harrowing evidence, painting Paul as a man consumed by control, violence, and selfishness. Kirsty's story, once filled with hope and ambition, was now the centerpiece of a dark narrative of manipulation and betrayal. Evidence that shocked the court. Key forensic evidence played a devastating role in the case. Blood splatters on the ceiling of their apartment, barely concealed beneath hastily applied paint, revealed the sheer brutality of the attack. The forensic team detailed how the patterns suggested repeated blows, painting a horrifying picture of the final moments of Kirsty's life. Forensic experts revealed that luminol tests uncovered more blood traces on the walls and floor, suggesting a brutal struggle. The rug that had been removed from the apartment was described by neighbors as heavily stained, though Paul insisted Kirsty had taken it with her. CCTV footage, another critical piece of evidence, captured Paul in the early hours of the morning, calmly wheeling a suitcase near the roadside ditch where Kirsty's body was later discovered. His casual demeanor, juxtaposed with the heinous crime, sent chills through the courtroom. It showed him carrying the suitcase, her final resting place in the dead of night, his demeanor calm and calculated. Investigators further uncovered chilling transactions on Kirsty's bank card, used by Paul hours after her death to withdraw money and visit a massage parlor. Kirsty's diary, a voice from beyond. Perhaps the most haunting evidence came from Kirsty herself. Her diary, unearthed during the investigation, unveiled a heartbreaking descent into despair and fear. The entries painted a vivid picture of a woman grappling with suffocating control and violence, her words serving as a haunting testament to her unspoken suffering. In one entry, she wrote, "Every day feels like a battle. I feel like I'm drowning and no one can hear me scream." Another entry, dated just weeks before her death, read, "I'm terrified of him. I don't know how to leave, but I know if I stay, it will destroy me." These words, raw and desperate, left the courtroom in stunned silence. A mother's painful testimony. Kirsty Wilkinson's testimony was among the most emotional moments of the trial. Through tears, Kirsty recounted the stark transformation of her daughter from a vibrant, hopeful young woman filled with dreams to someone subdued and consumed by fear. She shared poignant memories, such as the way Kirsty's laughter had faded and her once bright demeanor had dimmed under the weight of her circumstances. She recounted the subtle signs she had ignored, Kirsty's evasive answers, the bruises she claimed were from work, and the way her once bright eyes seemed dimmed by an invisible weight. "I wish I had seen it sooner," Kirsty told the court. "I wish I had fought harder to bring her back home." Her words resonated deeply, highlighting the silent agony of families who lose loved ones to domestic violence. The defense's desperate attempts. Paul's defense team struggled to counter the overwhelming evidence. They argued that Kirsty had left voluntarily and suggested her death was the work of an unknown assailant. But the evidence told a different story, one of calculated deceit and brutality. Witnesses testified to Paul's controlling behavior, his quick temper, and the escalating violence in their marriage. Even his demeanor in court, cold, unemotional, and deflective, contrasted starkly with the grief of Kirsty's family. The verdict and sentencing. The jury deliberated for less than a day, returning with a unanimous verdict, guilty of murder. On February 4, 2010, Paul Grabham was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 19 years. The judge's condemnation was scathing, calling Paul's actions cruel beyond measure and driven by an insatiable need for control. As the sentence was read, Kirsty's family wept quietly. Paul, in contrast, showed no remorse, his expression blank as if unaffected by the gravity of his actions. The devastation left behind. While the verdict brought a measure of justice, it could not heal the wounds left by Kirsty's death. Catherine descended into a deep depression, haunted by guilt and replaying every moment she believed she could have done more to save her daughter. Kirsty's father, David, became withdrawn, avoiding conversations about the tragedy that had shattered their family. Haley, Kirsty's closest sister, turned to alcohol as a coping mechanism, a choice that would tragically lead to her own death from alcohol poisoning 5 years later. The Wilkinson family, once bound by love and unity, was left fractured. Kirsty's death was not just a loss, but a ripple effect of grief and despair that would echo for years. A stark reminder and a call to action. Kirsty's story became a rallying cry for advocates against domestic violence. Her case illuminated the hidden and insidious nature of domestic abuse, underscoring the peril of overlooked red flags and the critical need for timely intervention and unwavering support for victims. Advocacy groups used her story to educate others, organizing campaigns to raise awareness and promote resources for those trapped in abusive relationships. In memory of Kirsty, her friends and family channeled their pain into action. They shared her story widely, hoping to inspire others to recognize the signs of abuse and seek help. Through their efforts, Kirsty's life and tragic death became a symbol of resilience and a catalyst for change. For those who knew her, Kirsty's laughter, kindness, and determination remain vivid memories. While her life was tragically cut short, her legacy endures as a reminder of the importance of listening, acting, and supporting those who suffer in silence. The lingering shadows. In the years that followed the trial, Kirsty Wilkinson's story continued to resonate, casting long shadows over those who had loved her and the community that mourned her loss. While justice had been served in the courtroom, the scars left by her tragic death lingered, shaping lives and sparking important conversations about domestic abuse. The Wilkinson family's struggles. Kirsty's mother, Catherine, bore the weight of her grief like a silent burden. The memories of her daughter's vibrant laughter and bright spirit clashed painfully with the haunting images of her final days. Catherine often replayed their last conversations, tormenting herself with the belief that she could have done more. "If only I had pushed harder," she confided to a close friend. "If only I had seen through the excuses." Her days became marked by quiet reflection, punctuated by bouts of overwhelming sorrow. She channeled her energy into advocacy, speaking at events and working with domestic violence organizations. Catherine's goal was clear: to ensure that no other mother would endure the same heartbreak. Kirsty's father, David, withdrew from the world. Once a jovial and outgoing man, he now avoided gatherings and found solace in solitude. The weight of losing his youngest daughter and later his eldest, Haley, to alcohol abuse left him struggling to reconnect with life. Sonia, Kirsty's middle sister, took a different path. Motivated by a sense of responsibility and anger, she became a vocal advocate for domestic violence awareness. Sonia often spoke about the subtle signs that had gone unnoticed and the importance of intervention. Her speeches, raw with emotion, resonated deeply with audiences. Haley's tragic end. For Haley, the loss of Kirsty was a blow she could not recover from. The two sisters had shared an unbreakable bond, and Haley's guilt over failing to protect Kirsty drove her into a spiral of self-destruction. Alcohol became her refuge, numbing the pain she couldn't bear to face. "She was my baby sister," Haley had said during one particularly vulnerable moment. "I should have been there for her." In 2014, 5 years after Kirsty's death, Haley succumbed to alcohol poisoning. Her passing added another layer of grief to a family already fractured by loss. For Catherine and David, it felt like losing Kirsty all over again. A community awakened. Kirsty's case left an indelible mark on the Bridgend community. What had once seemed like a distant issue, domestic violence, was now painfully real. Her story became a rallying cry, inspiring local organizations to expand their efforts and provide more accessible resources for those in abusive relationships. Schools and community centers began hosting workshops on recognizing and addressing signs of abuse, and Kirsty's name was often invoked as a reminder of the stakes. One particularly poignant initiative was the establishment of the Kirsty Wilkinson Memorial Fund, aimed at providing financial support for victims of domestic abuse seeking to rebuild their lives. Catherine, despite her personal struggles, played an active role in the fund's efforts, ensuring that Kirsty's legacy would serve as a beacon of hope for others. Paul Grabham's unrepentant silence. While Kirsty's family and community worked tirelessly to create meaning from her tragedy, Paul Grabham remained unrepentant. From his prison cell, he maintained his innocence, claiming he had been wrongly convicted. His lack of remorse was a source of frustration for Kirsty's family, who longed for acknowledgement of his guilt and a shred of accountability. Reports from the prison painted a picture of a man unchanged. Paul kept to himself, avoiding confrontation but also refusing to engage in any rehabilitation programs. To the world, he remained the cold and calculated figure who had stolen Kirsty's life. The broader impact. Kirsty's story sparked national conversations about the hidden dangers of domestic abuse and the systemic barriers victims face when seeking help. Advocacy groups cited her case in campaigns, emphasizing the importance of early intervention and the need for a robust support network. One of the most significant outcomes was the introduction of Kirsty's Law, a legislative effort aimed at improving protections for domestic abuse survivors. The law focused on streamlining access to restraining orders, providing emergency housing for those fleeing abuse, and funding public education campaigns. While the law couldn't undo Kirsty's tragedy, it became a powerful testament to her enduring impact. A legacy of resilience. For those who knew her, Kirsty Wilkinson was more than a victim. She was a young woman with dreams, a fierce determination, and a heart full of love. Her life, though tragically cut short, inspired change that would ripple far beyond the confines of Bridgend. Her family, though forever marked by loss, found solace in their advocacy work. Catherine often said, "If Kirsty's story can save even one life, then her death won't have been in vain," and in many ways, it hasn't been. Her legacy lives on in the lives she continues to touch, the conversations she continues to spark, and the hope she continues to inspire. Kirsty Wilkinson's story is not just a tale of tragedy. It is a mirror held up to society, reflecting the urgent need to address domestic abuse in all its forms. Her life, filled with ambition and resilience, serves as a reminder that even the brightest lights can be dimmed by the shadow of control and violence. But her legacy stands as a beacon for change. Lessons learned. As we reflect on Kirsty's life, certain lessons become painfully clear. Domestic abuse often hides in plain sight, masked by excuses, silences, and a victim's fear of judgment. Kirsty's story underscores the importance of recognizing early warning signs: isolation, control, and emotional manipulation, and intervening before it's too late. For Kirsty's family, the realization came too late, but their courage in sharing her story has sparked awareness across communities. Their pain has become a driving force for advocacy, reminding us that change begins with difficult conversations and unwavering support for those in need. A national wake-up call. The introduction of Kirsty's Law marked a pivotal moment in the fight against domestic violence. By streamlining access to protective measures and raising awareness, it has already begun to save lives. Yet, legislation alone is not enough. We must foster a culture where victims feel safe to speak out, where communities are vigilant, and where abusers are held accountable. A personal plea. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic abuse, don't wait to act. Reach out to local resources, confide in a trusted friend, or contact a domestic violence hotline. Silence enables abuse. Speaking up can save lives. Truth in the Shadows. At Truth in the Shadows, we are committed to shedding light on stories like Kirsty's. Through awareness, education, and advocacy, we strive to honor the lives of victims while preventing future tragedies. Join our community to stay informed, share your thoughts, and help us fight for justice and change. Together, we can ensure that Kirsty's story continues to inspire action. Subscribe to our channel and be part of this vital conversation. Let's turn the pain of the past into hope for the future. Because in the end, every voice matters and every life is worth fighting for.